Welcome to another episode of Beyond Physical, where we talk about the mental, emotional, social, and at times spiritual benefits of exercise. We believe that exercise is more than movement, and this podcast is our attempt at sharing that message with the world by sharing our own as well as our guests' experiences and knowledge. If you enjoy it, we ask that you please spread the message by leaving a rating and review, or even better, by sharing with a friend.
Today we're going to talk about a really cool topic close to home for us both. I'm sure close to home for Mark as well, and close to home for anyone who was privileged enough to be involved in sports growing up. And that is youth sports and mental health. So the study that we looked at was conducted in the US. So wherever you are in the world, if you're not in the US, unfortunately the sample is not representative of where you are from. So it's not representative of where we're from either. But I still think the takeaways resonate and are relevant. And there's some really cool key insights, two of which are, the first one is quite intuitive, and that is that those who participated and committed to youth sports, i.e. playing from kind of childhood until the end of adolescence, being 18, they realized a kind of greater level of mental health. In other words, they kind of had a favorable frame of mind throughout life. They had fewer symptoms of depression and anxiety. They navigated difficult situations in life better. And that was kind of correlated to their playing sports. And then those who didn't play sports comparatively had worse symptoms of depression and anxiety. But what was super interesting was that those who played sport and then gave up sport, i.e. did not stay committed to sport throughout their kind of adolescence until 18, they actually experienced worse symptoms of depression and anxiety than those who didn't play sport.
That's so
Which is very interesting. And I think there's a lot that ties into that. Obviously, neither of us are mental health experts, but I think we're practitioners in the sports and movement field, we can speak to a lot of the kind of components that come into play, like self-esteem and self-worth, and those kinds of conversations around if somebody feels that they are not good enough, or they walk away from something and it feels like a little bit of a loss. I can definitely understand how that might play into the mental health kind of things. But in terms of the actual study, there were about 4,000 participants, and it was conducted in the US. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here. But I thought it would be cool to chat to you about it, Matt, because you've done a lot of sports coaching. You've coached a lot of kids. You actually, from what I remember, set up a sports program at a school once, or you took it over or something like that.
I stepped in for sports coordinator.
Yes.
Yeah, it was so interesting.
And it's obviously a topic that we've covered a couple of times on Beyond Physical, but what was it like navigating, setting that system up, or kind of coordinating that system, and how did the personnel who weren't involved in sports treat it? Did they prioritize it? Was it something that was looked at favorably, or was it something that was kind of an afterthought? And how did you find, what were some challenges you found in that space?
In that space of time, I think that wasn't actually too long before I joined Horizon. I think that was probably like a year before, or in that same year, 2023, like start of 2023, middle of 2023, when I was looking to kind of like go from coaching to something a bit more administrative, give me a bit more responsibility, and also like have a bit more say on how things roll out, because as a coach, you just have to come, you follow the program. You can't actually question why the program is at this time, why don't we have enough time to do certain things. So when I got the opportunity to step in as a sports coordinator at the junior school, I remember it was so exciting. Like I treated it like it was everything, because it was. It was an opportunity to kind of go in and look at the structure, see how these kids kind of interact with it, and change it so that it could help them kind of like interact with their sporting codes better, and then also take out any issues which are like such standard issues nowadays in schools, whether it's with PE or after school sports. If I have to start with the issues first, I would probably start with the fact that like it's not prioritized as much. So if it's going from like a subject to a PE lesson they'll almost be like that over time. So it's not like the lesson ends and you immediately go to PE. It's almost like a bit of a drag. So when I first got to the school, um, when I went for my first lesson, it was almost like, okay, we have PE at 2, but the teachers only bring out the kids at like 2:15. So you're like, we already have to still walk to the field, you know what I mean? So it takes a lot of time away from the kids actually getting to play, getting to do movement, getting to kind of like interact with what they need. Because I feel that movement is such an essential cog in kind of like the learning process in school and like getting the full kind of benefit of education, you know. Um, and that's the first thing I kind of changed. So it was very refreshing to go in and be like, okay, I'm gonna actually come 15 minutes before the lesson ends. I'm gonna wait there, and I'm gonna basically tell them, okay, in 15 minutes time, I'm gonna come and collect the kids. So that's the first thing that I did. Take them all the way to the field, or even like get access to the on-school premises instead of going to external field. And that made such a big difference in the kids because from that first interaction, like them knowing that they have more time to play and more time to do something that they love, was already a change in like their behavior. Because I would notice that there would be such a struggle on like them trying to get these kids to like behave and stuff, and I'm like, you're just not giving them what they want, which is they just want to be able to have time to play. So giving them that, they would listen so much better. And I think once the teachers saw that, they were like, okay, let's see what like the plan is here. And from there, I would kind of like have pre-planned sessions, almost like how I would do it as a personal trainer. So kind of like write up what's my plan for a week or 4 weeks, put it up on like a notice board so that the kids, the teachers, they can all be aware and like, especially for the kids, they can kind of like have something to look forward to. It's not just a general PE session or school sports session. It's like,
I wonder if any schools. Sorry to interrupt, but I wonder if any schools have sports before class starts.
Yeah.
And that is like the structure, because I remember when we were at school, sport was always after, like it was at the end of the day. True.
yeah,
True. If you were playing like A-team water polo or swimming or A-team rugby, then you'd train at the beginning of the day. But like the majority of the sport training
afterwards.
sessions was after school.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, a lot of adults train before work, and that kind of, energizes them from a mental standpoint to then go and have a good day of work. Obviously, you have to coordinate, what is the load on the students, and you got to make sure that they aren't training
Yeah.
too hard or playing too hard, because then they're going to be sleepy during class.
Yeah.
But I think there could be a lot of merit in that, and I'd love to look at some studies and see if it's been looked at. Because I know that a lot of adults have a schedule where they thrive on training before work.
That's true.
And
And like just to add on to that point, in this in this PE schedule that I was at the school, I know that they did exactly what you said. Now they did most of their stuff after school, and I know I made a change to it. So I said, let's do one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one after school. So you do like your athletics after school, which was probably the most important thing. We'd have all the groups all together, and then the one in the morning and the one in the afternoon, you could like have certain groups all together in the morning, certain groups all together in the afternoon, and there was a bit of like, actually, there was a lot of what is the idea. That's why I really enjoyed my experience there. The principal was very like positive about it. She was like, okay, what's the idea here? And let's see if it works. There was no, okay, this doesn't work. This is not part of the traditional schooling system. This is not how we do things. She was very for the kids, and she was very for how are we going to make it better for them to engage with like schooling, and to also like kind of focus on maybe some of the things that they are personally struggling with. And I know that the big focus when I was in that system was you get a lot of kids that, I mean, in school you see them as kids that don't behave, but these are also just normal kids that you don't know what they're going through in terms of like trauma or like
and they've got too much
at
energy
home,
as
or
well.
they have things like too much energy. And with this system that I implemented, and also because of the person that I am, I kind of tried to get to know all the kids that I was working with. And as as hard as I thought it would be at the start, like once I actually got a hang of it and I actually got to know all the kids and I got to hear them, because I swear kids, like they soak up so much. And
They do, they're
when you
sponges.
realize what kids are talking about, like some kids are talking about things that are happening at home, like things that are affecting them, and you're only like 7, like, and they talk about it because they don't understand the magnitude of what they're talking about. But what you hear as an adult is like, wow, I never knew this kid was going through this. And creating a system where the kids could trust me as the sports coordinator or coach and come to me and say, I'm actually having a problem with this, and I feel like that's why I'm behaving like this. And I go to the principal and I'll be like, that child is not behaving that way because of this, but it's because of this. And we put a system in place to kind of like help them. And then over the 6 or 12 weeks that you work with this kid, you see a change in their behavior.
It's
And I think
very
that's magical, you know?
that's very rare for that kind of relationship to exist in a school environment. I don't know about you, but I often felt like I felt like there was a very kind of professional relationship between myself as the student and then the teacher or the coach. Like I never really like related on a level playing field. It was more like there's a hierarchy, and I think that was there with good reason. But it also didn't really make it a space that was conducive to sharing actual stuff with the teacher or the coach. I also think that it's kind of you have to have a lot of self-awareness to be able to identify. I mean, even as adults, it's difficult to go, I'm acting in a certain way. I don't actually, and maybe it's being interpreted as X, Y, and Z. That's not actually my intention. The thing is, I'm feeling stressed or anxious or whatever, and it's manifesting in this and that way, which is like a very, you need to have a fairly high level of emotional intelligence, which I think is something that children struggle with. At least, I don't know, that's my perception. And I think maybe they don't struggle with identifying it, but they might struggle with articulating it and actually explaining it. That's why I think oftentimes it's very helpful to have a teacher or a professional of some kind who maybe even if they aren't as in tune to like foster an environment where the kid shares, they just identify something and kind of make some sort of, they have an interpretation of it and be like, you know what, maybe they're not just very naughty, maybe they are just high energy and need to be in sports or need to be in this. But I don't know, I have no idea in terms of what the current landscape of education is like. So I don't know, at least like primary education, high school. So I don't know how teachers are engaging with kids on stuff like that. But I remember when kind of I was in high school, that wasn't really the way it was done. It was either you're naughty or you're not, you obeying the rules or you're not obeying the rules. There wasn't really like inquiry into the nuance of why you may or may not be misbehaving. It was kind of just you're being naughty.
And I think to add on to that, like, I think from my position, I had to be very careful, obviously, because you don't wanna blur the lines. Like you want it to be that separation in terms of, okay, this is a student and I am like the teacher and I am the person that's overseeing this program. So a lot of the times when it came to those conversations, or when people would like, or when kids would come to me and they would talk to me about certain things, I would not kind of like bring that conversation about. But my main thing and my main idea from when I started that day at that school was, I'm going to create an environment where they feel comfortable to come to me. And I'm not going to even like navigate, like they can navigate the conversation, and I will just like understand what they try and say and help them to the best of my ability. And like even just creating an environment where kids can be comfortable to make a mistake.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that
it.
was the crazy thing. Like I remember it might have been against school rules, but I remember like there were these 4 kids that came and they were like, we don't have our clothes. And they were really crying, dude, because they wanted to play. And I was like, it's okay. Like, take off your school shoes, because you can't play with your shoes on the court, and play. Just bring your clothes next time. Tears gone away. They're so happy. And I'm like, that's so weird. Like, that's such a barrier that doesn't need to be there. Like, I understand that we want to have that bit of like structure, but if it's like a young kid and they honestly forget, because they are like forgetful sometimes, they just rush and they go and they do all these things, and maybe their parents forget to pack it. So you take that one barrier away and you can have like a kid really enjoying their time, and they don't take that one incident and they push it out into another forum, and that's what you see. So you get like rejected, or like you get faced with a block here as a kid. You have to outlet it somewhere. So then they become like, they like kind of annoy someone else, or they get involved with bullying someone else, and you think like, oh, that's the problem, but it's not. So I guess that was the first thing that I realized and that I changed when I was there, I kind of just not became softer, but I just had more conversations about things. Like I wouldn't just shut it off and be like, "That's how it is. Like it's done." I'd just be like, "Okay, guys. Like I understand you don't have your stuff here today. Let's. I'm still gonna let you play. I'm still gonna let you have fun, but just take that with you and then make sure that you bring yourself the next time. And if you can't, let me know if there's an issue before the next session, and then I can help." Because that's what we should be there as educators, like when a kid comes here with the issue or someone comes here with the issue, we should start that system from young already, where we give that bit of help. We create the environment where it is okay, because as soon as they feel like it's not okay, they carry it with them all the way into high school, all the way into like real life, where they don't want to make mistakes, they don't want to disappoint anyone. That's a real thing, dude. Like people do carry trauma like that, where they feel like they don't want to disappoint the next person, because maybe in school they experience like an educator being really hard on them for failing a subject and stuff. And like for us, is like even for me, when I think about moments that I had in school, it's small to me now, but in there it felt like everything.
Yeah, like a child's universe is often quite nuclear. So like any seemingly small situation for them can feel very, very significant.
Of course.
So yeah, it is important to kind of handle with care and caution and mindfulness when it comes to that. But I make this analogy, and I'll bring us back to the kind of like, I suppose, high energy child and hyperactive kid and the kid that's not focusing or being naughty or whatever. It's a really weird analogy, but I think on a kind of philosophical level with humans, what we often do is we sanctify human life. So we put humans outside of the animal kingdom, and this is going to challenge some people's spiritual beliefs, but in my set of beliefs, we are within that same realm. We are animals at the end of the day. We are human animals, which means that we have the same basic requirements that animals need. And we need to move, we need to socialize, or we need to obviously eat, breathe, sleep, procreate, all those kinds of things. But movement is something that, if you look around you in nature, it is happening perpetually. All animals are moving almost all of the time, unless they're sleeping, and it's a vital, fundamental part of their existence. And I think a lot, and this is a totally kind of, I don't want to say unresearched, because I'd say it's mildly researched, but a lot of the challenges that we're being faced with in terms of people's mental health in the 21st century has a lot to do with how little movement is a part of their lives. And that is something that, a shocking statistic, to take us back to that episode that we recorded on movement and the World Health Organization's kind of inquiry into levels of inactivity. So 31%, which was 31% of adults at the moment are failing to meet their minimum movement requirement. Yeah. So it's circa 1.8 billion people, more or less, in the world at the moment who aren't meeting the minimum requirement of 150 minutes of moderate activity a day, and moderate activity is cycling to work, it's going for a walk, it's carrying your groceries to the car. That's moderate activity. 81% of adults, of children and adolescents, are failing to meet that requirement. So it's insane. It's literally crazy. Like it is, and that is something that is fundamental to people functioning optimally and healthily within the world. It's got so much more to do with mental health and mental acuity and just kind of social adaptability and all those kinds of things, aside from just the physical body. Because I think a huge issue that we have in the discourse around exercise and health in the world at the moment is we fixate on things like weight loss. And yes, weight loss is an important thing to address if you are maybe insulin resistant and you are morbidly obese and it is actively threatening your life. Then that's a conversation you probably need to have if you are interested in prolonging your life and being around for your family, if you've got a family and whatever. But that's not actually the point. The point is people aren't moving enough, And that has a psychological effect. It's got nothing to do, well, it does have something to, but it's got very little to do with, how you look. It's got to do with how you're feeling and how you're existing in the world. And if we look at a scary statistic, like 81% of adolescents are not meeting their minimum movement requirement, which is fuck all. It's 150 minutes
Yeah, it's
of
crazy.
of moderate activity.
And the thing
That
is, like,
that's a serious problem.
and that
Like,
can be done within like structures like school or like workplace.
Absolutely.
Like these are things that can be integrated into workplace.
Brew, that's child abuse. Simple. If 81%, it sounds ridiculous, but
That's
if
crazy.
81% of children are not meeting their minimum movement requirements, those children, in my opinion, are being abused. That's child
Because
abuse.
they're not being equipped for later life,
No.
later stages of life, I guess, and they be put in a position where they're actually not going. Like the thing is, life is hard as it is already. So like, if you
100%.
don't have a good base, or if you're not exposed to that, or if you're not kind of motivated in doing some movement, going to play with your friends, going to do some activity, like you're gonna be struggling later in life.
100%. If you are not being equipped as a young well, think about it. It needs to be addressed in the same way as a child having a little plate of food put in front of them with enough green, enough yellow, enough brown, enough color to kind of tick off the kind of food chart, whatever you're trying to do nutrient wise for your kid. The same conversation, and you've got a bedtime for your kid, you've got a wake up time for your kid. All of that needs to marry with movement. Without movement, that stuff is not going to be able to have the effect you want it to have.
Yeah.
And think about it. If somebody was not sending their kid to school, and they could, and they were not feeding their kid properly, or at all, and they could, you would turn around and you say, you are abusing your child.
Yeah.
That's child abuse. That's
Yeah.
neglect. That's negligence. That's the exact same thing, in my opinion, as if you're not promoting an active lifestyle for your kid.
That is very true. Yeah.
And it's scary because also this thing it's got a delay on it, where we're currently looking at that proportion
stat, dude.
proportion of youth that aren't moving. That youth is going to be tomorrow's kind of population. And there are there's tons of research into the societal effects of unhealthy people. People who are mentally and physically unhealthy, and obviously, just first and foremost, you're concerned about the individual. How are they experiencing the world? But when you go onto like a broader kind of perspective, this is taxing healthcare systems. We have under-resourced hospitals, and they're already ill-equipped to deal with the number of people who are unwell. Now imagine you've got this massive wave of people who aren't moving, who are now going to encounter all these lifestyle-related diseases because of not moving. And a lot of the time we build these habits as children. We build them as kids. If you chat, it's incredibly difficult to build exercise as a habit as an adult. It's that whole thing: can you teach an old dog new tricks?
Yeah.
You can, but it's flippin' hard. And I think there's a massive responsibility on us as exercise educators, but also just on schools and parents and things like that, where you've got to address that as a fundamental pillar of child rearing. It's like they can't just be summer left on like an iPad, or I don't know what the kind of go-to entertainment thing is now for children, because I'm not a parent, but it's like, I don't know, man. It's scary that number of people are not.
It's hectic.
active.
It's an intense thing, and I think like if you think about us growing up as kids, I mean, personally in my capacity, I know that like there was a lot of movement, a lot of playing outside, a lot of doing that, and I do think that has played a big role in like making my day to day more enjoyable. Because like as I said, life is hard as it is. Like you get a lot of things thrown at you, and having the tool set, I know you were talking about this the other day, being able to have the tool set to be like, I want to go for a run for an hour, and I just want to like just clear my mind and stuff. Being able to do that is a massive thing.
It's huge.
Like you don't see it when you're in it, but for example, like when I was sick for like a week, I feel it. I'm like, where's my run? Where's my movement? Where's all these things? And there's such a deep link. Like I was thinking about it when I was not well, like 2 weeks ago. But there's such a deep link to like my movement now and the movement that I used to do when I was a kid. there's such a deep link into like that for me. Like I think about when I used to move when I was younger, and it brings back so many good memories, and that makes my movement that I do on a daily basis even better because I'm able to like access those memories. I'm able to think about how fun it was, and like it brings back that same feel good feelings into my day to day now, which is so crucial as an adult because I feel like there's a lot of times where our journeys can be very like you alone a lot of the times, even if you have that support system around you, and having that base with you to be like, this is like something that can help me feel good on demand when I need to do it, and it can help me think about like all these things. Like that's exactly what we're talking about, which is if you can give your kid that now, they're already going to be so equipped in terms of like being able to access these tools on demand and like help them to cope with their day-to-day things, you
For
know.
sure.
And that ties into mental health then, because when you are put into like a rut where you're like mentally occupied with something, how do you then get out of that if you don't have stuff in your toolbox? Because sometimes you could go through your whole mind and be like, I'm looking for reasons here to like help me get out of this. And if you don't have anything, you'll just be staying there and it'll cycle, you know, until you find that thing that can help you unlock and just be like, maybe I just need to do this. And while you're doing that, you meet someone, they talk to you about a solution for your problem. You're like, what? I didn't know that. Life becomes better, you know? Like that's how life works. It's so crazy because everything is interlinked. I believe everything's interlinked. And it's so funny. I was talking about manifestation with Kezia, like, I think it was yesterday or the day before. And I was like, when I go to sleep, I try and manifest the next day. Like, such a small activity I can do. Like, help someone learn an exercise. And I know that when I do that, like, it's full circle for me. And it ties into other things happening in my life, you know? And it's like small things, like waking up early, like helping someone do something, doing this, doing that. And it's like a continuous cycle. And like, I believe that that also comes from like me being able to explore my imagination when I was younger as a kid, not being told don't do that or don't be like, don't be silly. Like that's not real, you know. Like creativity is also a big thing to foster as a child, and like to like be able to be in an environment where you can push that creativity and that imagination and play and always move around, you know.
And I believe that sport plays a vital role in fostering creativity because at the end of the day, anything that has a goal attached to it and predefined parameters, and then room within those parameters to figure your way out towards that goal is an environment for you to practice creativity because it's problem solving. And problem solving is not a one size fits all. It's a, you can go around, you can go through, you can go over, you can go under, you can, phone a friend and get them to collaborate towards getting the thing done. And I think that is a huge benefit of sport that people often overlook is problem solving and creativity, and that goes for individual and team sport because you basically get given an outcome that you need to work towards, and you get given the rules, and you're like, okay, get there, and there's no playbook. It's like, okay, you're going to have a coach who's going to say, you should probably do this, you should probably do that. It'll work best for our strategy if you do X, Y, and Z, but you've still got room to play. You've still got room to be, what if instead of passing the ball here, I grubber it through and see if that works. Oh, wow, they've turned it over, they've scored, we lost the game, and our final derby match as under 15 sees, fuck up, I'm not doing that again. You tried, but you tried. No, thankfully I didn't experience that. But it's like that kind of room for controlled play is hugely beneficial for stimulating that problem-solving muscle, and it's also outside of a space that has often. That if it's a healthy space, that it's devoid of punishment. You're not really going to get punished. Obviously, the result is that is kind of a binary outcome that you or win, lose, or draw. Those three outcomes you kind of obviously want to win, so you can be punished in the sense that if you lose, it doesn't feel good. But anyway, you aren't really judged on that hugely. As you kind of progress through the sport, the pressure mounts, expectations become higher, then you have stakes. But when you're a little kid, you can play around and have lots of fun with it. And I think that's really important. But I think tying in our episode we recorded a couple of weeks back on the movement kind of epidemic or the inactivity epidemic, and this study that's come out about the correlation between sticking at sports through school for youth and mental health, it's painting quite a concerning picture. And I think it's a picture that requires action from practitioners like ourselves and teachers like ourselves. But it's also more than anything else, I think it calls on the people who are directly kind of motivating and driving these kids to do and not do things, i.e. parents, and I find it very difficult to speak to that because I'm not a parent, but obviously there are systems in terms of like where you send your kid to school and what activities they participate in, and that kind of contributes to it as well. But I think the lowest hanging fruit is like at home, and the easiest way to start with that as well is setting an example. You go for a walk and take your kid with you.
Yeah,
Or you
small
go for a
things.
hike and take them along with you. But I think it's something that is a huge cause for concern, and that it shouldn't be taken lightly. And we need to ditch this whole thing of overweight or not overweight. That shouldn't be the conversation we're having. It should be about active or inactive.
Yeah.
It should be about moving or not moving, because that's the thing that is the actual kind of lever for driving good health. Is, are you moving? And then obviously, are you sleeping? Are you socializing? Are you doing those other things? But the movement aspect is so important. And we kind of die on this hill of like the whole fat shaming stuff and the this and that. And that's because people are getting distracted. People are getting completely distracted by a kind of a byproduct of what moving or not moving kind of does. You are less likely to be overweight if you move more. Generally speaking, not necessarily always.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to do with what we're actually trying to work on here, which is getting people to move more. Because I would argue that you could be, and also this is going to get even more layered and philosophical. What is overweight? How do we set the parameters for what overweight and underweight is? What is normal? What is acceptable?
And it's different for everyone.
It's different for everyone. It's subjective. A lot of the times you'll go get a blood panel or something done, and you'll come back with certain ranges, and it'll say within normal range. But what does that mean? Does that mean I'm healthy? Maybe not. Maybe 6 months prior, I was in a different range that is my actual baseline, but it's outside of normal range. It's like there's so many things to consider, and I think to simplify it, we can almost move away from the whole, like I said, overweight, underweight, adequately weighted. It's like look at how you're actually, what your habits are. Look at how you're living and moving and that kind of thing. Because as we've seen, as the research has shown, it's correlated to mental health. It's correlated to how anxious we feel, how depressed we feel, how well we kind of work through and process those feelings. Because it's also not a kind of a solution to that, because we will almost always be faced with situations that induce an anxious response or a depressed response. You lose a loved one, you're going to feel shit. Doesn't matter how healthy you are, you're going to feel really bad. But maybe you can move through that.
Using the toolbox of like movement and like all these other healthy aspects that you have in your foundation.
Exactly.
And I think to like the other thing is like getting kids to obviously have that environment created for them to push them further into sports and doing movement and keep it up, and keeping up consistently. And then the other thing is what I've experienced as a coach and like working with other coaches is like having schools and having systems, making sure they know who they're employing, because you can't just have any random guy just
And they do that.
come in to coach. You know what I mean? Like
They'll do that.
I know that it's also like a thing of like you're looking at obviously the economy and you're looking at opportunities having to be created. So like the entry level sometimes in like a coaching setting is not like this high qualification entry level where if you like working with junior kids you may just need like a level 1 certificate or this, but it's not even about qualifications. It's just about who is the person that you're getting to work with them. Like why is there not enough tests done or like proper face-to-face interviews where it's like, who are you as a person and how are you going to deal with these scenarios? Because there's been a lot or scenarios where I've had to step in and be like, listen, you're actually not dealing with this thing properly. Go and stand there. I'm gonna deal with this child because this kid's gonna like leave in like a year. You can see it happening because I think from my personal experience, there's been moments in school sports where, and mostly school sports, not actually club sports, but mostly school sports where I'm working, like I'm struggling a bit, like whether it was with my football, and the person just doesn't know how to work with me as like an athlete, as like a kid. Like you can't just come with this one size fits all for everyone. It doesn't work the same. You can't just be hard on everyone because everyone's different,
For sure.
you know?
There's
And
nuance.
taking that into like my adulthood, I'm glad that I healed from that trauma and I was able to kind of like look at it and be like, okay, I'm gonna make sure that doesn't happen to the next person. And I spot it immediately when I see something happening like that. So I'll step in immediately and stop it. But that impact, I don't think like a lot of people realize that like that impact that you can have one conversation you can have with a kid, with like a young adult that is in sports, that has like these aspirations of kind of like going professional or pushing to see if they can get anything out of the sporting code they're in, and they may be struggling with a certain aspect. The conversations matter. It's like a deciding conversation every single day because they are also not sure of what the path looks like. Like a lot of times people don't tell them which is, well, like how close they are to success. So today's conversation could be the end of everything, or it could be the start of something new.
Yes.
You know. So I'm very very passionate about that, and I think that we need to be very aware of who, like, and this all comes as part of the environment. Who is like interacting with like our kids, you know, or like who's interacting with your kids, and how are they dealing with situations where your kid misbehaves or they do well and stuff. Because this is the other aspects where a kid can do really well. Some ASMR in the background. The kid can do really well, and then the coach is not like acknowledging that, and that also does a dent in their mental health or like the way that they see like doing well versus not doing well. Because then they think it
And
doesn't even matter.
it's great that you bring that up because in the research, this article that we based this episode off, they speak about, and we'll wrap things up shortly, but they speak about, like I said, kids starting and then starting with sport and not seeing it through all the way actually damages their mental health as opposed to not having played sport at all, which is pretty mind blowing. But and a couple of the factors they spoke to had to do with coaching, over professionalization of the sport at too early of an age.
Yeah.
Very high pressure, being kind of working with a coach that they felt is too harsh. And I think that's really important. And obviously taking a nuanced, subjective approach to each case, each team, each kid. Like you said, it's not a one size fits all. But a quick one to leave people with, as somebody who has been a coordinator of a sports program at a school, what is one thing that you would encourage parents to do to help get their kids and keep their kids more active or more involved in sports?
I'd probably say, like, first of all, create the environment for them to talk about their sports.
Okay.
Like, get to know what they really enjoy. So whether it's like having a conversation with them, and it's tricky because sometimes kids are also like they don't want to have conversations a lot of the times. I mean, like sometimes they want to just like go and do their own thing. But when they are ready to have that conversation, make sure that you're ready. You know, and I've seen it with um, like people around me that do have kids. Like for example, um, there would be a lot of times where he would or they would try and kind of like go to the kid and be like, "Oh, how was your day?" and stuff, and they wouldn't like interact. But then later in the day, they would be so ready to interact, and you just need to make sure that you're ready for that because they want to be heard, you know. And if you can give that to them and hear what they really enjoy, and then give into that and support them, and also, like when they do make mistakes and when they feel down about certain things, like foster that conversation, like let them almost have the conversation with themselves. You know what I mean? Don't like end it too quickly because then it allows them to also go through the thought process, like develop that thought process of, oh, I didn't enjoy sport today. Maybe it was this, maybe it was that. And you're like, oh, like, do you think it was that? Why do you think it was that? You know, like kind of lengthen the conversation so that they can also put two and two together, you know? Because a lot of kids, I've realized working with them over the years is, and the big trend now is they don't know, like the winning and the losing is still like a very hectic thing. There's still a big line between winning and losing. So if they're not winning, they're completely losing. and if they're losing, they're never going to win again. So getting kids to also understand that even as they turn, like it's not gonna run out. Like you're gonna lose and you're gonna win. There has to be a balance of it. And I think having that conversation introduced earlier for a child is so important. Like especially because like when a kid goes up into from junior level to like primary school to high school, like if that stays with them, if they only think that winning is important, then they're not going to take the lessons that are so crucial to development from losing, because there's so much there. So one, create a good environment for your kid to like open up and be able to talk about what they love and what they don't like, and support them on that, stand by them on that. And if there is room for conversation, open up that conversation, and like allow them to kind of like express themselves, because it's so important. And kids soak up more than we think, and they're also like smarter than we do think at that moment.
Okay.
They might just not be able to communicate it. So it's like it'll be a lot of like having to put two and two together. There's been a lot of time as a coach I've been like listening to a child, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna think about the words that they told me, and I'm gonna come back to them the next day, and I'll come back to them the next day, and it will make sense. But it's a lot of decrypting, and sometimes it won't have to be like that. And then, most importantly, I guess just that support. That support means the world to kids. It means the world, and also setting an example. You know, you at a sports level, if you go into your kids' matches and you're not really setting an example in the way that you're behaving, like as a parent or as a supporter for them, then they take on to that behavior. They think that when things don't go their way, they can shout and like behave a certain way. But if you kind of show them like, no, that's not the way that you do it. If something doesn't go your way, it doesn't mean you have to go into a fight or argue, all these things. Because you see that a lot, it's like school sports settings, like a lot of arguments, a lot of fights from the sidelines, because it's passion. But passion can be communicated differently. So yeah,
Okay.
that's my top three.
Okay, so
Top
fostering an environment conducive to sport and exercise, having the conversations, and supporting the kids. Mine would be encourage them to try lots of different things and reward them when they stick with something, or offer some sort of incentive. I remember every time I'd score a goal or complete a football season when I was like 5, my mom would get me a Bionicle, which was very nice. Yeah, that was hype. That was a lot of fun. But Matt, thank you so much for the chat, and I hope everyone that you enjoyed it. And it's been a pleasure. We'll catch you in the next episode.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to the show, guys. We love answering specific questions. So if there's anything you want to know, leave a comment or reach out to us directly at HorizonZA on Instagram, or email us at movement@horizongym.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Seb Prentice, and this is Beyond Physical.